Picture yourself now not standing tall in the hot sun, but sinking softly into the cool, dark earth. Feel the weight of so much time above you. Close your eyes and let your breathing slow down, just like the gentle flow of the great River Nile. Long, long ago, bigger than any memory you hold, a hidden force began to move mountains. This was not the power of one king, but the quiet strength of countless hands working under silent skies. Tonight, we drift into this slow, gentle mystery. We will find the names and the homes of the people who worked beneath the desert, building wonders that still hold secrets today. Let your mind become as quiet as the stone and allow the secret history of the great pyramid builders to rock you softly to sleep. We start our journey now with the first small light in the deepest cave. First light in deep caves. The first story of the silent builders does not start high up in the sun, but deep in the dark. We must look at the quiet glow that happened long before the great stones were put in place. This glow was the tiny fire of a stoneworker finding his way in a dark cave. They were looking for the best, hardest rock to help them build things much later. They knew the land well, feeling the rough walls with their hands and smelling the dust. This first light was small, but it was the start of something huge. It was the moment they found the first good pieces of granite and limestone for the king's giant project, miles away from their homes and the shining river. They moved slowly, not in a rush, but with the quiet knowledge of where the earth kept its secrets. This work was dangerous, taking them far inside the ground where the air was heavy and the noise of the world was gone. They used very simple tools, bits of stone, pieces of wood, and the tiny light of their fire. They knew which walls were too weak and which rocks would break right. This deep, hidden knowledge of the earth was the very first tool they used. Without the brave miners who went so far down into the ground, the Great Pyramid could never have happened. This hidden work was the silent base for the big, tall mountain they planned to build. Finding the stone was only the start of a very long walk. They had to cut the huge, heavy blocks out of the earth itself, a slow and patient job. They did not have the loud machines we use today, just their strong arms and hard copper tools. They would push wooden wedges into the rock. Then they would pour water on the wood. The wet wood would grow bigger and split the heavy rock right out of the mountain. This was a long day's work for just one piece of stone. They knew this slow, careful work was important for the big thing the king wanted to do. Every cut they made was a promise to the pyramid's future strength. The stones they cut were not all the same. Some were soft, like the white limestone for the middle parts. Some were hard, like the pink granite they needed for the king's room inside. They had to know where each kind of stone was hidden. This was a science passed down from father to son, a quiet map in their minds. The knowledge of the land was their greatest treasure. They knew the best time of the year to cut the rock when the river was high and helpful. They planned everything long before the first block was moved. This first work shows us that the pyramid was not just built with stones, it was built with planning and deep earth knowledge. These were the first steps of the silent builders, the stone finders. They were the ones who saw the mountains not as a wall, but as a place to find what was needed. They were quiet experts. They did their hidden work in the dark so the big final structure could shine in the sun. They understood that the most important work sometimes happens where nobody can see it, deep down in the quiet rock. And after they cut the stone, they had to mark it. A simple symbol was painted on the raw rock, telling the workers where it needed to go. This mark was the first sign of teamwork, a soft message across the miles. The light from their small lamps touched the stone and showed the way out of the dark cave. They knew their job was done for now, but the rock's journey was only just beginning. They left the quiet caves and walked back to the sunlight, ready for the next, even harder part of the great building project. Cities that vanished at night. After the stone was cut, it began a long trip to the building site. This journey started on the great river, the Nile. The river was the first, best road of ancient Egypt. The workers used big, strong boats made of wood and rope. They loaded the heavy stone blocks onto these boats when the river was high after the rainy season. This made the stone move more easily, floating on the deep water. The journey was slow and peaceful, watching the banks of the river pass by like a dream. The river carried the great weight with a gentle push, helping the workers get the massive pieces closer to the pyramid site. Along the Nile, many small towns and cities vanished, not in war, but under the sand and time. These were the simple homes of the silent builders. We see only a ghost of their life now, but it was once full of noise and smell. These villages were close to the river, built with mud bricks that returned to the earth very easily. They were not made of stone like the big tombs because they were meant for life, not forever. The builders' homes were simple, but they were warm, filled with the smell of baking bread and the quiet sounds of family. These towns and villages were special because they were organized just for the great pyramid project. The king gave the workers food and a place to sleep, so they did not have to worry about finding their own supper. They were paid, not in gold, but in grain, beer, and fish. This was their own way of trading and living. The simple houses were built quickly in straight, neat lines, showing how well the whole project was planned. They were true worker communities, built to support the biggest task in the world, showing great teamwork. When the workers were resting, these cities were places for simple fun and quiet talk. They played small games with bone pieces, telling stories under the stars after a very long day. They shared news from their home villages far down the Nile. This was how they made a hard job feel like a common life. They were a family of builders, far from their farms, but close in their new work town. The spirit of these towns was one of simple strength, knowing they were doing something important for the king. These cities that vanished at night teach us about the life of the silent workers. They show us a life lived by the season, with the high water of the Nile bringing the stones and the dry season bringing the hardest work. Their food came from the fields around the cities, all managed by the king's people. They ate mostly bread and fish and drank beer made from grain. This simple diet kept them strong for the very heavy lifting. We find bones from cows and goats, showing they were fed well, which tells us their work was valued. So we remember these forgotten towns built of mud and grass that disappeared back into the earth. They were the true homes of the people who worked so hard on the stone pyramids. They were the cities of the builders, the food makers, and the families who waited. These simple houses were just as important as the big stone monuments because they held the people who had the strength and the will to build the lasting wonder. We see the truth. The great tomb was built by people with quiet, normal lives, not slaves. Simple symbols carved in stone. The next mystery of the silent builders is hidden in the marks they left behind. These are not the long, famous words of the king carved deep into the walls. These are small, simple symbols that tell a story of their own. They are the marks of the work gangs, small teams of men who worked together on one part of the Great Stone Mountain. They needed to keep track of who did what, so they painted simple names onto the huge stone blocks they cut and moved. These work gangs had fun, playful names that told us a little about their spirit. We find names like the Friends of Khufu or the Menkaure Drunkards. These names were not insults, they were proud, funny signs of their teamwork. It shows us that they had a good spirit and a way to laugh, even in their very hard work. These names were painted with red ochre, a simple, earth-colored paint that lasts a long time. These symbols are found hidden away on the inner faces of the blocks, the parts no one was meant to see. The small symbols were a way of counting. When a team of builders put a stone in place, they put their mark on it. This let the overseers know which group did the work. It was how they kept score, a way to show pride in their heavy lifting and careful placement. This marking system was much like a simple scorecard for the world's biggest game. It made sure every block was counted and every gang was given credit for their strength and speed. This was a fair way to manage thousands of men working close together. This simple mark is a link to the life of the worker. When we look at a mark that says, "the strong ones," we are seeing the pride of a small group of men who lifted a huge, heavy stone block. It is like they are whispering their team name to us across thousands of years. We know they worked hard and were proud of their skill. They were not just names in a book, they were people with team spirit and a sense of shared purpose under the hot sun. The most important thing these marks tell us is that the workers were not all forced to work. These friendly gang names show they were organized and happy to be part of the big task. People who are forced would not have funny, proud names for their groups. They would not take the extra time to carefully paint a team's symbol on the back of a block. This simple act of marking the stone with their small team name shows a deep sense of belonging to the Great Pyramid project. This is why the little symbols are such a treasure. They are the quiet voice of the silent builders telling us their story without using loud words. They are the true names of the people who lifted and pushed. The marks are hidden now, covered by other stones, but the message is still strong and clear. The marks of these teams of the friends and the strong ones show us that teamwork and a simple team name built the largest monuments of the whole ancient world. Find quiet objects left by old hands. If we look very closely at the dusty ground around the Great Pyramid sites, we find small, quiet things that the builders left behind. These are not big treasures, they are simple objects that tell us about their daily lives. We find broken pieces of pottery that held their water and their beer. We find little bits of bone that were used as needles or simple tools for fixing their clothes. These quiet objects are like small whispers from the past, showing us what the builders held in their hands every day. We also find lots of very rough, heavy stones that were used as tools. These were not carved or pretty, they were just simple, hard pieces of rock used to shape the bigger blocks. The workers would hit the soft limestone with these hard hammers, chipping away the parts they did not need. Over time, these hammer stones would wear down and break, and the worker would simply throw them away and find a new one. The number of these broken tools shows us how many builders worked and how long they worked for the king. Among the simplest things left behind are the shoes and mats they used. These were made of dried grass and thin strips of leather. They wore simple sandals to protect their feet from the hot sand and the sharp edges of the stones. At night, they would sleep on woven grass mats on the floor of their mud brick homes. These are things that fall apart and turn to dust very fast, but when they are found, they tell us about the tiredness of their bodies and the simple comfort they needed after a long, hard day of work. The pieces of pottery are the most common things we find. Every single worker needed a bowl for his grain and a jar for his beer. The king's food system was so big that thousands of these simple clay pots were made just to feed the pyramid army. When they finished eating, the workers just broke the bowls and threw them out with the trash. These piles of broken pottery show the sheer scale of the operation, how many meals were eaten, and how many strong men were fed every day by the royal kitchens. These small, forgotten things are the true connection to the human side of the great monument. They show us that the pyramid was not built by magic or only by kings. It was built by people who drank beer, ate bread, and broke their clay dishes. They had small, normal habits. These objects show us the simple, rhythmic life of the builders. Wake up, eat, work hard, eat, and sleep. They were people with real, tired hands who needed simple food and a soft place to rest in the cool night. The silent objects whisper that the builders were not far off figures, they were close, real people. A broken piece of a bone needle tells us that someone took the time to mend a tear in their clothes, even when they were so tired. These small acts of daily care are what bring the history to life. They make the past feel close and real, proving that the silent builders were careful people with a life that mattered long before the great stones were finished and the desert sand covered everything. Share easy tales of big empires. The job of building the great stone mountain was too big for just one small town. The builders came from all parts of ancient Egypt, from far up and far down the Nile River. This huge project was a way for the whole country to come together under one king. The men who came to work brought with them their own simple songs, their local ways of talking, and their small local traditions. The pyramid site became a quiet place where the entire big empire met. The king's empire was vast, and the Pharaoh was the center of everything. The builders knew they were working for the very heart of their country. They understood that this stone mountain was not just a tomb, it was a symbol of strength and forever life for the king, which meant safety and good crops for all of Egypt. This simple belief gave them the energy to lift the heaviest stones and keep working through the hot, long days. Their work was not just work, it was a religious duty. The tales of the king were very easy to understand. He was the one who controlled the Nile, who made the sun rise, and who kept the world from falling into chaos. The simple builders believed this story with all their hearts. When they saw the king's cartouches, his name signs, carved into the rock, they felt a connection to the big power that kept the river flowing and the food plentiful. Their simple, deep faith in the king's magic helped them to work hard and without doubt. Imagine the workers telling their own easy tales to each other at night. They told stories about the land where they came from. The fisherman from the north would talk about the wide, windy delta, and the farmer from the south would talk about the high, rocky cliffs. These simple, shared stories made the country feel less big and lonely. It helped them feel like brothers, even though they spoke with slightly different words and had different customs. They were all together now. The empire's strength was not just in its armies or its big cities, it was in the shared effort of these thousands of workers. They created a single purpose. The pyramid was the meeting point of the north and the south, a stone promise of a united land. When they worked together to pull the sleds of stone, they felt the pull of the whole nation. This quiet, powerful sense of unity was the real hidden force that lifted the blocks so high in the air. These easy tales of the big empire show us the power of a shared idea. The idea was simple: build a monument so big, so perfect, that the king would live forever, and in doing so, protect all of Egypt. The silent builders believed in this simple story, and that belief was their fuel. They built the pyramid not with brute force alone, but with the quiet, shared hope that their hard work would bring safety and good luck to their families back home. Whisper forgotten myths from long ago. Every night, after the sun went down and the hard work stopped, the builders spoke of the quiet myths. These were not loud, dramatic stories, but gentle whispers of how the world began. They spoke of the first hill of creation that came up out of the dark water, the same hill the king's pyramid was meant to copy. This hill was the first solid thing in a world of nothing, and the pyramid was their way of making that first moment last forever. The workers believed that the stone mountain was a giant stairway to the stars. The king would use this stair to climb up and join the gods in the sky. Their simple job of laying one stone upon the next was like building steps for the king's soul. This made their heavy work feel light and sacred. They were not just moving rock. They were helping their king find his place among the stars so he could watch over them forever. from the heavens. The most quiet myth they believed was about the journey of the sun god. They knew that the sun traveled through the sky every day and then went into the dark underworld every night. The king's tomb, the pyramid, was built on the west side of the Nile, where the sun always goes to sleep. This meant the tomb was the perfect place for the king to start his own night journey and rise again with the sun, bringing life back to the land. This connection to the sun's journey gave the builders a simple rhythm for their lives. They worked from sunrise to sunset, following the path of the god. They understood that their work was part of a much bigger, perfect circle of life and death, sun and shadow. When the sun dipped below the desert sand, they would stop, knowing their king would soon be starting his journey to the dark, and they would be ready to start building again when he rose. These simple, forgotten myths were the hidden glue that held the whole project together. They explained why the work was so important and why the king needed a mountain of stone. It was not for showing off, it was for saving the world. The workers felt the weight of this sacred task every time they pushed a sled or pulled a rope. It was a quiet honor to be part of the king's journey to the stars. So the builders carried not just stone but also deep, simple belief. They knew they were making the king's boat for the stars, the giant stairway to the heavens. Their whole lives, from the food they ate to the time they woke up, were tied to these quiet myths of sun, water, and creation. They were not just workers. They were priests of the stone, helping to fix the world in place with every single block they carefully laid down. Join stories from far lands. The great building project needed more than just stone from nearby quarries. It needed special woods, bright paints, and sometimes even rare spices that came from very far away. The silent builders were not just isolated people on the Nile. They were part of a huge ancient network of trade that covered many distant lands. Their final work brought together stories from different cultures, all tied to the single purpose of the king's eternal house. Think about the tall, strong wood they needed for the sleds and the big ropes. Egypt did not have many good trees for building, so they had to get the best wood from places like Lebanon across the sea. This wood was cut far away, shipped on big boats, and then brought up the Nile by the same river that carried the local stones. This single piece of wood used to pull a huge stone block held the story of a far-off place and a long sea voyage. The bright colors used to paint the inside rooms of the king's tomb also came from many different parts of the earth. The deep blue color, so important to the gods, came from a stone that was mined far away and then ground into fine dust. The green and yellow colors came from different kinds of special earth. The silent painters, often living among the heavy lifters, mixed these colorful powders with water to tell the story of the king's life and his journey to the stars. Even the tools the workers used held stories from faraway places. The hardest copper for their chisels and the bronze for their heavy tools often came from mines outside of Egypt. This metal was mined, melted, and shaped by people the pyramid builders never met. But without the strong metal from these distant lands, the workers could not have cut the hard granite for the king's most important inner rooms. The most interesting thing is how the silent builders received these far-off goods. It was not always through simple trade. Sometimes other strong leaders sent them as gifts to the king, as a sign of respect and friendship. So the workers would use a special wood from a friendly king in another land, or a beautiful stone sent as a token of peace. This made the pyramid not just a local building, but a quiet sign of the whole world's respect for the power of ancient Egypt. The stories from far lands show us that the pyramid was a world project, even though it was built in one place. Every piece of special wood, every colored powder, and every strong metal tool carried a memory of a distant journey. The silent builders worked with materials that had traveled farther than they ever would. They were the ones who brought all these faraway stories together, using them to build the king's eternal mountain in the hot desert sand. Look at calm patterns in the sky. The workers did not have clocks or watches like we do today. Their time was kept by the calm, slow patterns in the sky. They used the sun to know when to start and stop their work, and they used the stars to keep track of the months and the seasons. The whole building project, from the first cut of the stone to the final stone placed on top, was timed by the quiet movement of the heavens above them. The most important star for the builders was one that seemed to stand still in the north sky. This star was called the Undying. It showed them true north, helping them to make sure the base of the Great Pyramid was pointed perfectly straight. If the pyramid was not aligned with this steady star, the king could not properly take his place in the heavens. This star was their most trusted guide, a silent, constant light in the darkness of the night. The changing patterns of the stars also told the builders when the Nile River was about to flood. The flooding of the Nile was the most important event of the year, bringing new mud and rich soil for the farms, and most importantly, raising the water level to float the heavy stone barges. When a special bright star appeared on the eastern horizon just before sunrise, the workers knew the water was coming, and they needed to be ready to float the next delivery of stone. This deep knowledge of the sky made the silent builders feel close to the gods. They felt their work was not just on earth, but was connected to the cosmos. They used simple ropes and poles to watch the stars and measure the shadows of the sun. This simple, accurate science helped them build something so huge and perfect that it still lines up with the stars today. Their careful measurements were a quiet act of faith. When they rested at night, they looked up at the stars and saw the shapes of the gods and the heroes of their simple myths. They saw the shapes of the boats that carried the sun god, and they saw the paths the king would take. Looking up was a way to feel peace after a day of very hard work. The stars were their bedtime stories, telling them the world was ordered, vast, and safe under the watch of the king and the gods. The calm patterns in the sky show us the perfect order of the ancient world. The work on the pyramid was a copy of this order. Everything was measured, everything was planned, and everything had its right time. The builders were not just strong, they were also stargazers, using the deep knowledge of the heavens to guide their work on the simple stone here on earth. This quiet wisdom made their movements slow, steady, and exactly right. Feel hidden forces all around. When the silent builders worked, they felt a hidden power that was more than just their own muscle. They believed that everything they did was helped by the forces of the earth and the gods. When they lifted a stone, they were not alone. They felt the heavy block move with a strange, easy grace, as if an unseen spirit was helping them to pull the rope and push the sled. They had simple ways of asking for this hidden help. Before they started a new day, or before they tried to move an extra large stone, they would offer a small prayer. They would pour a tiny amount of water or wine onto the sand as a gift to the gods of the earth. This quiet act was their way of asking for strength and safety. They did this without big ceremony, just a simple sign of respect to the powers they knew were all around them. The biggest hidden force was the power of the Nile itself. The workers used the water's natural rising and falling to move the stones, as we spoke about before. They understood that the river was a living god, Hapi, who brought life and carried their great loads. They did not fight the river, they worked with it, waiting patiently for the water to be high enough to help them. This act of waiting and listening to the river was a sign of their deep connection to the land. This feeling of a hidden power made their work less lonely and tiring. When they chanted together while pulling the heavy sleds, they were not just making noise. They were inviting the spirits of strength and unity to help them. The rhythm of their song was a kind of magic, making the work flow easily. This simple, shared sound made the heavy stones feel lighter, moving them forward one slow step at a time toward the base of the great stone pyramid. The overseers, the ones who managed the men, also believed in this hidden force. They planned the work to match the best times of the year and the best flow of the river. They knew that a man full of belief and hope was stronger than a man who was just told what to do. The whole system was built not just on rules, but on the quiet faith that they were doing what the gods wanted, which gave them a hidden source of power. So when we look at the Great Pyramid, we are not just looking at rock. We are looking at a monument built by human effort and a deep, simple belief in a hidden world. The silent builders worked in partnership with the sun, the stars, and the great river. They felt the hidden forces all around, and they used that feeling of connection to give them the strength to build the biggest, most lasting structure the ancient world would ever see. Mix truth and gentle myth. The stories we hear about the pyramids today are often a mix of what is true and what is gentle myth. It is true that the workers were organized into great teams, and it is true that they worked for the king, but the myths tell a different kind of story, one about the spirit of the people, not just the stone. When we mix the truth and the gentle myth, we get a fuller picture of the silent builders. The biggest myth we must gently put to rest is the idea of simple slavery. The truth is that the main work was done by skilled workers and strong farmers who came for periods of time to serve the king. This service was part of their duty, a tax paid in muscle and effort. They were fed, housed, and cared for, not beaten or starved. This is the simple truth found in the bones and the records of the workers' towns near the great stone site. The gentle myth, however, is the story of the king's magic rope. The myth says that the king had a special rope that could lift the heaviest stone blocks all by itself. Of course, this is not true, but the gentle myth tells us something important. It shows the workers deep respect for the king's power and their own feeling that their hard work was guided by a higher force. The myth was a way of saying, this job is so big, it must be helped by magic. Another beautiful myth is that the pyramid stones fit together so perfectly because the gods themselves set them in place at night. The truth is much more wonderful. The stones fit perfectly because the silent builders were masters of measuring and cutting. They spent hours and hours making sure the stone faces were flat and smooth. The simple truth of human skill is often more amazing than any magical story. When we mix the simple truth of the hard work with the gentle myth of the king's magic, we get the real story of ancient Egypt. The king had the idea, and the workers had the skill and the faith. They believed in the king's power so much that they made the impossible happen through careful, patient, and very hard work. Their belief was the true magic that lifted the heaviest stone. So let us keep both the truth and the gentle myth in our mind as we rest. The truth of the healthy workers and their organized villages is a sign of good leadership. The myth of the king's power is a sign of their deep faith and dedication. Together, these two stories tell us that the silent builders were strong, skilled, and deeply proud of their life-saving work for the great king and the eternal pyramid. See lines that cross many years. If you look at the stones of the great mountain, you can see lines that cross many years. These lines are not just the marks of the builders, they are the marks of time itself. Every line in the rock, every tiny break, and every small change in color tells a long story about how the stone was made by the earth and then used by the human hand for the king's pyramid. The stone blocks were first created by the quiet work of the sea millions of years ago. Tiny shells and small sea creatures settled to the bottom and were slowly squeezed into hard, strong rock by the weight of the water. When the workers cut this stone, they were cutting through a story much older than ancient Egypt. They were using the great power of the deep past to build a promise for the distant future. The different layers of the stone blocks also show the changing years of the building project. Sometimes one layer of stone might be cut a little differently than the layer below it. This could mean a new team of builders arrived, or maybe the old ones had new tools, or perhaps the king simply changed his mind about a small detail. These tiny changes in the stone are like a slow, quiet diary of the great building effort. One of the most important lines that cross many years is the line where the first builders finished their work and the new ones took over. This line is often marked by a tiny change in the size of the blocks or a small shift in the way the blocks are laid. This shows us the true length of the building time, which was not just one king's life, but sometimes spanned across 2 or 3 generations of workers. Imagine a father working on a low layer of the pyramid, and then his son, years later, working on a much higher layer. The line in the stone between their work is a line of family and time. It is a quiet promise passed from one generation to the next. I will finish what you started. This deep, simple commitment lasting many years is the true strength that held the great stone mountain together. These lines that cross many years are not just simple lines, they are the map of time, the record of human effort, and the quiet history of the earth itself. They show us that the pyramid is a slow, patient conversation between the deep past and the future. The silent builders were patient people who understood that a great work takes longer than one lifetime, and that every simple block holds a piece of this very long story. Explain what the lines mean. When the silent builders looked at the lines in the stone, they did not just see color, they saw a special meaning that helped them decide where to place the stone. They knew that a certain kind of line meant the stone was stronger and should be put low down in the pyramid base. Another kind of line meant the stone was very good for smooth, outer-facing walls. Their lives depended on reading these simple, natural codes. The stone blocks were not all the same size either. The lines they carved into the sand to plan the building showed them where to use big blocks and where to use smaller ones. They used the biggest, heaviest blocks for the very bottom layer and slowly made the blocks smaller as the pyramid went up. This was their clever way of making the structure strong and stable against the wind and the earth's movements. The simple lines the builders carved on the outside of the finished pyramid were also important. These lines were the angles and the slopes that made the pyramid look like it was reaching for the sky. They had to be perfect and straight. The workers used simple tools like a piece of rope with a weight on the end to make sure every line was perfectly vertical, matching the vertical line of the star they watched at night. The lines also meant something about the king's journey. The 4 main corners of the great stone mountain were aligned to the 4 main directions: north, south, east, and west. This perfect alignment was not just for beauty, it was a line that prepared the king's soul for his journey to the sky. North was where the eternal stars lived, and the builders aimed the pyramid for that place of forever life. Even the inside of the pyramid had lines that meant something special. The long, narrow tunnels that led to the king's burial room were not straight by chance. They followed a line that pointed to specific stars in the sky. When the king was put to rest, his soul was meant to travel along this star line, shooting straight up to the heavens. The silent builders knew these lines were sacred maps for the king's final flight. So the lines on the stone, the lines in the sand, and the lines in the sky all came together to explain the great purpose. The silent builders were expert readers of these hidden lines. They understood that their work was a giant map made of stone, guiding the king to immortality. They patiently followed every line, knowing that the smallest mistake could throw the king's whole journey off its sacred course. Draw soft picture links. The silent builders left behind many soft picture links that connect them to us today. These are not the big carvings of the king, but the small, simple drawings they made on pieces of stone, called ostraca. These were like their simple sketch pads, where they practiced their art or just drew quick pictures of their everyday life and their work. We see soft picture links of the workers carrying big water pots on their heads to keep the other men hydrated. We see drawings of men pulling the heavy sleds with great effort, their muscles clearly showing. These simple pictures are very important because they are drawn by the builders themselves, showing us how they saw their own work and their own bodies, strong, heroic, and necessary. Sometimes the pictures show a funny moment, like two workers having a small disagreement or falling asleep while on duty. These simple, funny drawings bring them to life, showing they had normal human feelings just like us. They laughed, they argued, and they got very tired. These pictures are the best way to understand the human side of the Great Pyramid project, showing us their humor and their simple way of life. The soft picture links also show us how they made their simple measurements. We see drawings of a foot, a hand, or a cubit, the length of a man's arm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. These simple body parts were their tools for measuring, showing us that their own strong bodies were the first and most trusted measurement tool they had. They carried the map of their work right in their own hands and feet. Even the simple drawings they used to practice their writing and carving skills are picture links. A young builder learning to draw a perfect hieroglyph would draw it many times on a piece of stone before carving it into the final wall. These practice stones show us the patience and the dedication to craft that every single worker had to learn. They show us the careful process of learning a skill that was thousands of years old. These soft picture links are quiet moments caught in stone. They show us the builders' daily tasks, their simple jokes, and their deep commitment to skill and precision. These pictures, drawn by their own hands, tell a powerful story of ancient Egypt. The great monument was built by people who were proud of their work, funny when they could be, and deeply skilled in all the things they did under the hot desert sun. Bring old pictures to today. Now we take the simple pictures of the builders and bring them right into our own time. We look at the strength of their bodies and the simple, healthy food they ate. Today we can use science to prove that they were strong, well-fed, and cared for, not weak or tired. The old pictures and the new science tell the same story about the health of the workers of ancient Egypt. When scientists look at the bones of the builders found in the cemeteries near the pyramid, they see strong, healthy bones. They see men who ate enough food, and good food too. They see bones that show signs of very hard work, but not of sickness or lack of food. This modern look at old bones matches the old pictures of the strong, heroic men pulling the sleds and carving the stone. The pictures also show the careful medical care they received. If a worker broke a leg or an arm from a fall, the other builders would help. We find bones that were broken but healed well, wrapped in linen with simple splints of wood. This shows that they had doctors or healers who cared for them and helped them get better. A slave who was not valued would not receive this kind of careful, patient medical attention. The old pictures of the bustling, orderly worker towns are also brought to life today. Through modern maps, we can see the neat, straight lines of the mud brick houses from above, just as they were built. These maps show us how big the whole town was, enough for thousands of strong men and their overseers. The planning was perfect, showing a careful management that treated the workers as important parts of a huge, respected army of the king. Even the simple act of pulling the stones has been studied today. Scientists have tried to figure out how many men it took to pull one huge block. The old pictures show many men pulling on a few ropes, and the science today proves that this simple teamwork, along with a little wet sand, was enough. The ancient pictures and the modern math agree on the power of simple, unified human strength. So the old pictures are not just history, they are a truth we can prove today. The Great Stone Mountain was built by people who were strong, healthy, and cared for, and who worked with a deep, simple system of math and teamwork. The silent builders of ancient Egypt were heroes in their own time, and today, their bones and their simple drawings continue to prove their simple strength and great worth to the king. Share the first clear revelations. The clearest truths about the silent builders come from the small, simple graves that surround the Great Pyramid. These graves are not as big as the king's tomb, but they are very important. They hold the bodies of the workers who died while building the monument, and the things buried with them tell a simple story of respect and care in ancient Egypt. The location of the graves is the first clear revelation. They are placed very close to the king's pyramid, a huge honor. In ancient times, only very important people were allowed to be buried close to the king. This shows that the workers were seen not as cheap, forced labor, but as deeply respected servants of the king's sacred work. Their final resting place shows the high value placed on their lives and their labor. The objects buried with them are the next clear revelation. They were buried with simple tools, pots of food, and sometimes even small wooden boats for their journey to the next life. This custom of giving them tools and food for the afterlife shows that the builders were believed to have a soul and a journey just like the noble people. They were given what they needed to continue their work and their life in the next world. The walls of these simple tombs were sometimes painted with small pictures of their daily lives. We see pictures of them working on the pyramid, eating with their families, and sailing on the Nile. These are the clearest, most honest pictures of the silent builders we have. They wanted to take the simple joy and rhythm of their life with them into forever, and this was their way of painting their last wishes on the walls. Another clear revelation is that the builders did not just work for one king. When the king who started the pyramid died, the new king continued to care for the graves of the old workers. This shows a long-lasting respect, a deep understanding that the whole royal family owed a debt to the strong, silent people who made the eternal house possible. The respect for the workers lasted even when the king's rule passed to his son. These first clear revelations tell us a simple, true story of human dignity. The graves and the objects within them prove that the silent builders were a special class of worker, honored in life and respected in death. They built the greatest monument in the world, and in return, the king gave them a place of rest right beside him for all of time. This is the simple truth hidden just beneath the hot desert sand. Lift eyes to quiet. Cosmic wonder. The pyramid builders did not just look down at the stones, they also lifted their eyes up to the quiet cosmic wonder above. They saw the night sky as a perfect map, and the shape of their great stone mountain was a copy of that map. The builders understood that their work here on Earth was only a reflection of the deep, beautiful order of the stars and the universe. The careful alignment of the pyramid was one of their greatest cosmic wonders. As we have seen, they lined up the four sides to the four main directions, but they did so with such perfect care that it must have been a religious act. They were trying to make the earth building as perfect as the heaven building, showing their deep respect for the flawless order of the night sky. The king's final home was meant to be the best mirror of the universe. The silent builders knew that the stars, when seen from the top of the finished structure, would look different. They would see the constant, undying star right above their heads. This was the place where the king would find his rest. The workers who placed the last stone on the very peak were performing the final, most important act of cosmic connection, making the last point between Earth and the stars. The way they cut and placed the stone blocks also had a cosmic wonder to it. The sheer size of the blocks, the millions of pieces, all fit together without any glue or cement. This was their way of showing the power of order over chaos. Just as the stars move in perfect silent paths, the stone blocks of the pyramid were set in perfect silent layers, creating a structure that would last longer than any human life. They also thought about the number of stones. While we cannot know the exact number, they understood the immense quantity as a way to honor the endlessness of the cosmos. Every single stone was like a single star in the sky, adding up to a number too vast to count. This quiet cosmic thinking gave the builders a reason to be patient and careful with every single one of the 2.5 million blocks. So when we look at the great stone mountain, we must also look up. The silent builders looked up every single night, and they brought the quiet order of the stars down to the desert floor. Their work was not just simple construction. It was a grand attempt to build a perfect physical map of the cosmic wonder. They built a piece of the heavens right here on Earth, ready for the king's final quiet ascent. Watch history repeat in soft circles. The building of the Great Stone Mountain was not the first time Egypt had asked its people to work together for a big cause. If we look closely, we can watch history repeat itself in soft, slow circles. The work was done in a similar way for hundreds of years, from the first small kings to the very big famous ones. The methods, the food, the teamwork, and the faith stayed almost the same. The soft circle of history starts and ends with the Nile. The work was only possible because the river flooded every year. When the fields were underwater, the farmers could not farm, so they came to work for the king. This yearly rhythm of water and work was a soft, repeating circle that powered the entire building effort. The flood gave them the time to work and the water to float the stone, and then it returned them to their farms. The life of the builders was also a soft, repeating circle. They worked hard, they ate simple food, they slept, and they woke up to do it all again. They worked in simple cycles, 3 months on the pyramid, 9 months on their farm. This balance of duty and home life kept them strong and willing to come back year after year. This quiet, repeating cycle of service was the key to building for forever. Even the tools they used followed a soft circle. The hard stone hammers would break, be discarded, and then new ones would be found in the desert. The copper chisels would wear down, be collected, melted, and shaped into new tools. This cycle of use, breaking, and renewal meant that the old metal lived on in the new tools, and the spirit of the old workers continued in the hands of the new ones. The belief system was the strongest repeating circle of all. The idea that the king needed a great stone house to rise to the sky and keep the whole country safe never changed. Every king who built a pyramid believed this simple myth, and every generation of silent builders believed it too. This constant, unchanging faith was the solid rock on which the whole project was built, never wavering over many hundreds of years. Watching history repeat in soft circles gives us peace. It shows us that life, even very hard life, had a clear and steady rhythm for the silent builders. They knew what was expected, they knew the river would come, and they knew the work would continue. This steady, reliable repetition gave them comfort and the ability to focus on the small, important task of laying one stone perfectly, knowing the next one would come in its proper time. Open doors to hidden knowledge. The most amazing thing about the silent builders is the hidden knowledge they possessed. This was not knowledge written in big books, but knowledge held in their strong, patient hands and in their knowing eyes. They opened the door to hidden knowledge every time they made a perfect cut on a stone or placed a massive block in the perfect spot. Their skill was a kind of quiet magic. Their hidden knowledge of geometry was incredible. They knew how to make a perfectly flat surface on a huge block of stone, even before the stone was put into place. They used simple tools like wooden squares and string, but their final result was so perfect that modern tools can barely measure the difference. This level of precise skill was a hidden door to a powerful understanding of shapes and angles. They also held the hidden knowledge of the lever and the ramp. They knew exactly how high and how long to make the earth ramps so that the huge stones could be pushed and pulled up the steep sides of the pyramid. They understood the simple physics of force and weight, using gravity and friction to their advantage. This practical knowledge was the true engineering secret behind the whole building process, a quiet wisdom of movement. The overseers had the most important hidden knowledge of all, the knowledge of people. They knew how to lead thousands of men, how to organize the food, how to deal with problems, and how to keep everyone focused on the same long-term goal. This knowledge of human management, of making a huge team work in perfect harmony, was the deepest secret of the pyramid builders of ancient Egypt. The simple fact that the pyramid still stands today is the final proof of their hidden knowledge. The silent builders knew how to make a foundation that would not sink in the soft desert sand. They knew how to stack millions of heavy blocks so that the structure would stand for tens of thousands of years. Their knowledge of building was so deep and true that it defeated time itself. Let this quiet wisdom sink into your mind. The silent builders were not just movers of stone, they were masters of hidden knowledge. They understood the earth, the sky, the simple power of math, and the deep strength of organized human effort. Their pyramid is a huge, silent book of their knowledge, written in stone and perfectly placed so that it could never be lost to the shifting desert sand. Reach a peaceful high point. Now we reach the peaceful high point of the building project. This is the moment when the last perfect stone was finally placed on the very top of the Great Pyramid. This capstone was not a rough block. It was often covered in electrum, a shining mix of gold and silver. It was polished and smooth, meant to catch the sun's first light and shine like a second star, completing the connection to the heavens. This final moment was a huge moment of quiet celebration for all the workers and the king. The men who had spent years cutting, pulling, and placing the stones could now see the simple, perfect shape of their work completed. When the shining capstone was lowered into place, it was the end of a long shared journey and the start of the king's new, eternal life. The desert rang with quiet, respectful cheers. The peaceful high point was not just the top of the stone mountain, it was also the high point of the workers' pride. They stood back and saw what their simple, steady effort had created. It was proof that when thousands of men work together, believe in the same simple goal, and use their hands with skill and care, they can achieve something that will last forever, standing strong against the desert winds and the flow of time. This moment also showed the quiet trust the king had in his people. He trusted them to work for decades, to keep the faith, and to place the last, most important stone with the same perfect care as the first one. This trust was the true foundation of the project. The king's eternal life depended entirely on the skill and honor of the silent builders, proving their great value to the entire empire of ancient Egypt. After the capstone was in place, the work did not completely stop. The workers now began the slow, reversed job of taking down the huge earth ramps they had used to climb the pyramid. They also began to polish the outer casing stones from the top down, making the whole structure shine in the sun. This final work, making the rough stones smooth and perfect, was their last gentle act of devotion. This peaceful high point shows us the quiet, perfect symmetry of the work. Years of lifting stone up to the sky, followed by months of making the whole surface smooth and shining. The pyramid became a smooth, perfect mirror of the sun, reflecting light and eternal life back to the people on the earth. It was the moment of quiet, complete harmony between the earth, the work, and the silent, patient builders. close with soothing answers and one last question. Now we close this section of the story with soothing answers. We know the silent builders were not slaves. They were honored workers who were strong, skilled, and cared for by the king. We know the pyramid was built not by magic, but by the honest, quiet power of teamwork, deep faith, and an amazing knowledge of math and stone. The ancient records and the graves themselves have given us these final, comforting truths. The soothing answer is that the greatest things are always built by simple, good people working together. The secret of the pyramid is not in a hidden room or a lost formula. The secret is in the dignity of the workers, the strength of their organization, and the years of patient, steady effort. This quiet answer should bring peace to your mind, knowing that the monument is a symbol of human capability, not of force. The stories of the vanished cities and the marked stones tell us that the builders had simple lives full of purpose. They ate, they slept, they played games, and they went home to their families after their service was done. Their life was a quiet, balanced rhythm of duty to the king and care for their homes. And this is the simple, true story of ancient Egypt that the stones want to tell us today, a story of honor and simple strength. We have followed the journey of the stone from the dark cave to the river barge to the high peak of the pyramid. We have seen the lines that cross many years and the simple pictures that tell the story of their health and their good care. All these small details add up to one clear, final truth. The king respected the silent builders because he knew their hands were the only tools strong enough to build his eternal kingdom. The Great Pyramid now stands as a quiet monument to the dignity of work. It is a sign that when we value the people who do the work, they will build something that lasts forever. This simple, strong answer about respect and skill should wrap your mind in a feeling of peaceful, ancient security, knowing that order and care won over chaos and haste. And as we finish this chapter, we are left with one soft, lingering question. If the silent builders were so honored and their work was so perfect, why did they not sign their names on the outside of the great stone mountain? Why did they choose to remain the silent builders beneath the sands of Egypt? We will look for this last quiet answer as we continue our gentle journey into the deep night. Now take one deep, slow breath with me. Breathe in the cool night air and breathe out the dust of the ancient desert. Feel the quiet weight of the stone mountain settle over your mind. If this peaceful story helped you feel calm, please share this quiet journey with a friend who also needs rest. And if you wish to help this channel continue to whisper the forgotten truths of history, a silent like or subscription is the most beautiful gift you can give. Sleep is coming now, let the rest of the sand drift away. See the tools of their daily work. We continue our quiet search for the builder's silent answer by looking one more time at their simple tools. To understand why they remained silent, we must first truly understand the pride they took in their daily instruments. They worked with tools that were made of humble things: wood, copper, stone, and rope. These simple items were their true companions under the hot Egyptian sun. The most important tool was the plumb bob, a piece of string with a small weight on the end. This was the tool that showed them what was perfectly straight, what was true north, and what was right. They trusted this simple line more than any other thing. It was a visual symbol of the balance and order they strove to create in the whole pyramid. This simple string and weight was the tool that made their work heroic. The workers also carried a simple wooden square to check the right angles of every stone. They knew that a perfect square meant a perfect fit, and a perfect fit meant a strong, forever-lasting wall. This simple tool was a symbol of their skill and their patience. They knew that rushing the angle would weaken the whole mountain. They treated this simple square like a sacred object, a tool of absolute truth. For lifting, they used thick, strong ropes made of twisted flax or palm fiber. These ropes were worn smooth and soft by their hands over many years of pulling the huge stones up the earth ramp. The wear on the ropes was a story of 1,000 hard pulls, a memory of shared muscle and synchronized effort. These ropes were the veins that carried the heavy stone to the heart of the Great Pyramid. Even the simple baskets they used to carry the heavy mud and dirt for the ramps were their tools. These baskets were woven from local reeds and had handles worn smooth by their strong fingers. Each basket held only a small amount, but when thousands of men carried them together, they built the enormous ramp that was needed to raise the great stones. This simple, collective effort was the true power of their everyday tools. The tools of their daily work whisper the final answer. The silent builders knew that the true monument was not the stone block, but the perfection of the work done by the tool itself. They did not need to sign their names because their skill was already written into the perfect angle of the stone and the perfect straightness of the wall. Their work was the true signature, lasting longer than any paint or carve mark. Hear the echo of their songs and chants. The answer is also hidden in the echo of their songs and chants. The silent builders were not quiet while they worked. They filled the air with simple, rhythmic sounds. These sounds were their way of keeping time, staying strong, and making the very long day feel shorter. When you listen to the desert wind, you can almost hear the soft, faint echo of their work songs. Their chants were not long or complicated. They were simple, short calls and responses that helped thousands of men pull the rope at the exact same moment. The overseer would shout a strong word, and the workers would answer with a loud, short word like "up" or "go." This simple rhythm made their work a single, huge machine of human muscle, all moving together in one perfect, synchronized movement. The songs were also a way to tell simple, funny stories about their work or about the king. They sang about how heavy the stones were and how much they looked forward to their dinner of beer and bread. They made jokes and teased each other in time with the rhythm of the pull. This was their way of fighting the tiredness and keeping their spirits high in the long, hot sun of ancient Egypt. The echo of their songs tells us that the work was shared. The noise of 1,000 men singing the same short song created a feeling of deep unity. No one was alone when they were pulling the heavy load. The song was a common bond, a shared language that everyone understood, whether they were from the north or the south. This powerful shared sound was the invisible force that defeated the weight of the stone. When the sun went down, the chant stopped and the air became quiet and still. But the music of their shared work stayed in their minds, helping them to sleep soundly after their hard labor. The rhythm of the work was the final piece of the day, a quiet, simple melody that helped them find peace and rest in their simple, mud brick homes near the Great Pyramid. The echo of their songs is the final answer to the question of their silence. They did not need to write their names because their voices were already the sound of the entire monument. Their collective chant was the music of the building, and that sound was more important and lasting than any single name. Their song, the voice of the unified silent builders, is the true, heroic voice of the pyramid itself. Understand their simple dreams of the afterlife. To understand the silence of the builders, we must understand their simple dreams of the afterlife. The pyramid was built for the king's journey to forever, but the workers also had a gentle hope for their own final rest. They believed that their hard work for the king would also bring them a simple, peaceful life in the next world, a final, quiet reward for their great effort. The silent builder's dream of the afterlife was simple: a perfect, quiet farm with clean water that never stopped flowing. They did not dream of gold or grand tombs, but of a place where they could farm without having to worry about the flood or the drought. It was a dream of simple, unending peace and plentiful food. They believed their hard work on the pyramid was their ticket to this perfect, easy farm. We know this because of the small wooden models buried in their simple tombs. These models show tiny farmers working in tiny fields, tiny boats sailing on tiny rivers, and tiny houses with small gardens. These models were meant to magically become real in the next world, giving the worker the perfect, simple life he had earned through his honest labor for the king. Their simple belief was that the effort of building the king's huge tomb would pay for their own small, quiet rest. They were building the king's eternity, and in return, they were buying their own small piece of peaceful, forever life. This gentle belief gave meaning to their long days and their sore muscles. They knew their hardship was a direct path to a simple, quiet heaven. The quiet truth is that the workers' greatest desire was not to be famous, but to be forgotten by hardship and remembered by the gods. They did not need their names on the pyramid because their reward was far better: a peaceful afterlife where they could finally rest and farm in perfect, gentle conditions. Their silence was a choice for peace over fame. So the silent builders chose to have their signature be the pyramid itself, and their reward be a quiet dream of a perfect, forever farm. This simple, profound choice tells us that they valued the purity of their work and the promise of rest above all else. They were the most humble and the most effective people of ancient Egypt, building the king's glory while securing their own simple peace. Learn the names of the first overseers. If the workers were silent, some of the most important people who led them were not. The first overseers, the master builders who planned the ramps, the food, and the work schedule, did leave their names behind. These few names are like tiny, bright stars that guide us, showing that the most important work was to lead the thousands of silent hands with great skill and care. One of the most famous overseers was a man named Hemiunu. He was the king's cousin, and he was the absolute boss of the entire building project. His tomb is placed near the pyramid, and the statues found inside show him as a wise, heavy man, someone who commanded respect and understood all the complex numbers and plans. His job was to manage the huge flow of people, food, and stone. The overseers below Hemiunu also left their names in simple writings. These men were the ones who worked directly with the builders, the ones who stood on the ramps and kept the chanting rhythm going. They were the key to the whole system. They knew every man by his team name and knew which team was the fastest, the strongest, and the most reliable in ancient Egypt. Their greatest skill was not moving stone, but writing down the details. They kept careful, detailed records of who was paid what food and how many blocks each team placed. These simple, written names on dusty scrolls and pieces of stone are the proof of the organized, fair system that kept the workers healthy and motivated. The silent builders were managed by men who knew their names and kept track of their pay. The overseers did not just stand and watch, they were masters of all the building crafts. They knew how to measure the angles, how to cut the granite, and how to organize the transport on the Nile. The silent workers learned their skills from these overseers, making the knowledge flow from the leader down to every single hand on the rope. This teaching was the most important gift of the overseer. So, while the thousands of builders chose silence, the few leaders who planned the work did not. Their names proved that the project was not random, it was led by highly intelligent, organized, and respected people. These overseers were the voice and the mind of the great building effort, ensuring the hard work of the silent workers was never wasted and always counted. Close the circle with the human meaning of the great stones. We have now traveled the entire long path of the silent builders, from the first cave light to the final names of the overseers. We can finally close the circle with the human meaning of the great stones. The pyramid is not just a tomb, it is the largest, most lasting monument to the power of human dignity, shared purpose, and quiet, humble skill in all of ancient Egypt. The human meaning is that every single block was put in place with full intention. The silent builders did not sign their names on the outside because they believed the structure itself was the only signature that mattered. They knew that 1,000 years from now, people would look at the perfect angle, the smooth stone, and the sheer height, and the structure would quietly whisper the story of their perfect, honest work. The stones are a quiet library of human organization. They teach us that a great project is not achieved by one person, but by the quiet harmony of many thousands of hands working as one. The perfect line of the pyramid is a reflection of the perfect line of the thousands of men pulling the same rope, all believing in the same simple goal, the eternal life of their king and the safety of their land. Their silence was a way of making the king's message louder. By not putting their own small names on the outside, they made the king's monument shine brighter, and in doing so, they showed their deepest devotion. Their heroic anonymity was an act of faith, trusting that their reward would come not from human fame, but from the simple, quiet approval of the gods in the perfect afterlife. The human meaning of the great stones is the power of the unsung hero. The pyramid is a giant, eternal thank you note from the king to the whole country, resting upon the quiet strength of the farmer, the baker, the mason, and the stone cutter. They were the most important people, and their quiet work is their eternal voice, heard by anyone who stands still and listens to the sand and the wind. Now, as we finish our long journey and the sand begins to cover all the noise, you know the truth. The silent builders were never truly silent. They speak to us through the perfect angles, the healthy bones, the funny drawings, and the simple honor of their graves. They tell us that the greatest strength is found in unity, and the greatest honor is found in doing simple work perfectly. Rest now with this quiet, strong truth. The dust is settling now, and the Great Pyramid stands perfectly still under the cold, silent moon. The answer we found is a soft one. The silent builders did not sign their names because their greatest desire was not human fame, but divine peace. They trusted that their work, made perfect by their hands, was their offering to the gods, securing their own quiet rest and their simple farm in the next easy life. This simple faith was their greatest strength, lasting longer than the stone itself. Now let that quiet faith become your own resting place. Feel the peace of the desert night and the deep calm of a job well done. The true silence of ancient Egypt is not empty. It is full of the echoes of their chants and the soft rhythm of the Nile. And yet, there is one last, gentle thought to carry into your sleep. If the builders were honored and paid and their lives were so valuable, what simple, quiet thing were they planning to build next after the king's eternal house was finally done?